Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be joining us from. My name is Michael Colma, and I'm the head of programs and communications at International House at the University of Chicago. As we celebrate International Education Week, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual conversation, Next Generation Leaders, Cultivating a Culture of Peace. I would like to acknowledge and thank the International Houses in Berkeley, London, and New York, as well as One Shared World, for partnering with us on today's program. The first International House in New York opened its doors over 100 years ago with a mission to foster mutual understanding and promote peace through cross-cultural dialogue. That mission continues to guide the work of the 16 other international houses around the world as we bring together students, scholars, and thought leaders to explore the issues that matter most across borders, cultures, and disciplines. Today's program is one of many held annually by International House at the University of Chicago as part of our Global Voices Lecture Series programs. The Global Voices Lecture Series hosts prominent speakers, roundtable discussions, and conferences and seminars on a range of topics. As part of this program, leading voices from around the world come to share their thoughts, expertise, and exchange ideas on major issues facing the country and the world. Today's virtual discussion fits that programming mission perfectly. We are lucky to have with us today 6 next-generation leaders from our iHouses who spent this last summer cultivating a culture of peace via their Projects for Peace Awards in Brazil, Ghana, India, Kenya, and Rwanda. I want to thank these amazing young leaders, Ahmed, Srikanth, Anando, Judith, Ximena, and Christian, for sharing their time with us today. I also want to thank and now welcome our moderator for the conversation, Betsy Vegso, the Director of Projects for Peace. Betsy, over to you to get the conversation started. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. As Michael said, I'm Betsy Vegso. I'm the Director of Projects for Peace. I've been with the program for about 4 years. Our program is hosted by the Center for Community Engagement in Middlebury College in Vermont. But I'm not in Vermont today. I'm reaching you from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Thank you to the International House for inviting me today to moderate this conversation with the stars of the show, which are our grantees. Projects for Peace is a program that partners with about 100 educational institutions, including International House. We partner in order to find and fund young peace builders and change makers. We were founded in 2007 by Catherine Wasserman Davis. On her 100th birthday, she celebrated by funding 100 projects for peace. In her words, she said, "There will always be conflict. It's part of human nature. But I'll remind you that love, kindness, and support are also part of human nature. My challenge to you is to bring about a mindset of preparing for peace instead of preparing for war. This is my challenge and my urgent plea." This is really what we'll be talking about tonight, about how the grantees on the call tonight think about peace and think about preparing for peace in the ways that they're capable of doing in the communities they care about most. 18 years later, after Catherine Wasserman Davis' 100th birthday, there have been about 2,500 projects funded, and we have well over 3,000 alumni of the program. We seek innovative, community-engaged, student-led projects that are feasible over the course of a summer or between May and September. For some, the project may begin and end in a single year. For others, the germ of their idea may have become years before their Projects for Peace grant and may continue for years after. Over the next hour, you'll be hearing from the 6 grantees about 5 projects they worked on. We have prepared some questions for them, but we'd also like to hear from you. Please feel free to enter questions in the Q&A box, and we'll feed them into the webinar tonight. I'll start with some introductions, and as I read your name, if you could please turn your camera on. First, we have Ahmed Abubakari. He was nominated by the International House in Berkeley. And the title of his project is Servicare for Peace, a path to health and lasting unity for the Kayaye in Ghana. He's calling in from Ghana. Next, we have Srikanth Chandar. He was nominated by the International House in New York. His project was called Educational Workshops on Animal Welfare and Environmentalism. He did that project in India. He's calling in from New York. Anando Ghosh, he is getting his PhD in anthropology, health, and environment in London, and was nominated by the International House in London. His project was titled Advancing Environmental Justice Through an Intergenerational Citizen Science. That project happened in Brazil. He's calling in from London. We also have Judith Nguli and Ximena Valenzuela. They studied at the Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago and were nominated by the International House of Chicago. Their project, which they worked on together, is called Empowering Kenyan Women Entrepreneurs for Global Impact. Judith is calling in from Kenya, and Ximena is calling in from Peru. Finally, we have Christian Yesashimwe, nominated by International House Berkeley. His project was titled Sparks of Hope, Fighting Genocide Ideology Through Sports. The project took place in Rwanda, and today he's calling in from California. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Betsy.
Great. Good to see you all. Good to see you all. So let's begin with definitions of peace, since that's the heart of this work, and it's a fundamental element of your proposal and also your final report. How do you define peace? Maybe we can start with Srikanth.
Hi, everyone. I define peace as general coexistence. And one element of that, or the biggest element of that, in my view, is the coexistence of humans, every other animal in this planet, and nature. And yeah, I feel if we can achieve a coexistence in that way, then you can push forth peace in all other sectors of civilization.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Anando, and then Ahmed, and then Judith. Okay, Anando, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Betsy. So my definition of peace was inspired by, of course, my academic sort of training in anthropology, and I was particularly inspired by the words of this philosopher called as Martha Nussbaum, who said that if we are so much as to survive as a species and a planet, we clearly need to think about well-being and justice internationally and together. And I was also inspired by the Latin American philosophy of Suma Kose, or Buen Vivir in Spanish, which emphasizes harmony not only among human beings, but also between humans and nature.
Beautiful. Ahmed, and then Judith, and then Christian, please. Ahmed, go ahead.
I think for me, I can only say that a community is truly peaceful when the people, especially the most vulnerable, are protected, they are respected, and they're also able to thrive. So for me, peace is not merely the absence of conflict, but it's the presence of justice, whether it is criminal justice, reproductive justice, and then there is dignity, and then the people have good health. So basically, I think that's my definition of peace.
Thank you. Judith. Oh, Judith, you're muted.
For us, we look at peace as the ability for individuals, and especially women, to live with dignity, stability, and opportunity. And that is why we were very encouraged to lead a program that can enable women to feel more economically empowered and have skills that can support them and their families without any fear and uncertainty. Because then peace really becomes real when communities have access to opportunities and when women have the ability to participate fully in shaping their own futures.
Great. Thank you. Christian.
Yeah, I really want to first take for Anando's and Ahmed's kind of definition of peace, where you're also starting to see pieces coexisting between humans and environment, and also looking peace in the justice lens. But I started believing that peace is the whole, grounded in unity. Unity born from understanding that division that fuel conflicts are far smaller and more destructive than the shared humanity. So I see peace being food that is coming from roots of unity and seeing far from what is dividing people, what is more destructive.
Our next question is about just simply describing your project. Just if you could describe the basics of the project. Christian, why don't we just stay with you and you tell us about what you did this past summer?
This summer I worked with young people, and a number of non-government organizations to provide facilities that we would bring together, gather young people through games, because we wanted to gather young people to engage them in civic education about unity and reconciliation. And a platform that we created is right now serving as a medium for message and education on anti-hate, hate and other forms of socioeconomic issues. And the project is basically rooted in the belief that sports, like basketball, can be used to build peace through teamwork, discipline, and mutual respect. So we're using basketball to gather young people together and create programs that promote unity and help young people see beyond ethnic divisions. This project was implemented in Rwanda, of course, where 30 years ago there was genocide against the Tutsi that was a result of division, and we're using this platform to create unity as a route, as I mentioned, as a route for peace.
Thank you, Christian. Next, we'll hear from Anando, then Ximena, Ahmed, and then Srikanth about their projects. Anando, go ahead.
Yeah, so my project was with the Quilombola communities on an island called as the Tidal Islands in the northeast of Brazil, near the city of Salvador. So the islands have been facing environmental degradation due to the development of oil factories, thermoelectric plants, and fertilizer factories around. And this has actually decimated the mangrove ecosystem around the islands on which this community depends, both for its food, but also livelihoods. And recently they've been facing a number of health issues. But again, food is much more than sustenance and livelihoods. It's also a part of the culture, because the Quilombolas were descendants of African slaves who were brought on these islands. So in a way, this project tried to bring young people and elders together. So young people worked with elders to document the rich culinary heritage of the islands. And in doing so, the project tried to build ecological resilience, foster a sense of cultural pride in young people, but also instill a sense of purpose among the elderly and also strengthen community bonds.
Wonderful. Ximena?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Well, our project is called Kusadada, which means Grow Sister in Swahili. It took place in Nairobi, Kenya, between July and August, and was designed for women who want to become micro-entrepreneurs, many of whom run informal businesses such as small-scale crafts, clothing, beauty products, and household goods. We designed this skill building and market access program, offering training in product development, pricing, branding, digital literacy, and business confidence. So we pair these women we pair this program with practical tools too, like storytelling exercise, market linkage support through Culeta, that is a social venture and e-commerce platform that Judith also co-founded. And we identified these women who most of them were students in a vocational training center. So they have some practical skills, but they are often excluded from high value markets due to limited digital skills and even access to formal opportunities and long-standing gender barriers. So we work directly with community leaders, with local youth trainers and existing women networks to empower these women, to give them the skills that they were needing. Our approach was very community driven because we adapted the curriculum that we have based on the women's needs, schedules, and level of digital experience. Every step that we made was about building confidence, strengthening connections, and creating these sustainable opportunities beyond the training itself.
Thank you, Ximena. Ahmed, can you tell us about your project, please?
So my project was in Accra, Ghana, amongst the Kayaye. Now the Kayaye are internally displaced females between the ages of, I think, 12 to 30, who now work in the markets. They carry heavy loads, so they are porters. So what we did was that we had cervical cancer screening for them, but this was peer-led, and it was actually a form of reproductive health education, which was peer. We trained some of them to be peer trainers. We also registered them onto the National Health Insurance Scheme so that they could access healthcare anytime they fell sick. Then, because some of them had migrated from conflict zones, we had small focus groups where we talked about peace and unity building so that they could also build bonds. Because even though there was conflict ongoing in their home regions, they tend to stay together as a community when they get to the urban centers. So that was basically what we did.
Thank you very much. Okay, and Srikanth, please.
Hi. So our project was animal welfare educational workshops in high schools in Bangalore, India. And mainly the idea was to talk to students of 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders and basically give a sense of what is happening in the animal welfare space. And I chose India and Bangalore for this project because it's culturally very relevant in these areas because of the there's a lot of exposure to stray animals, and this kind of is like a good starting point to link towards all other forms of animal welfare, because that's also how I became aware of issues in different aspects about how animal abuse is a thing that is happening, starting from the kind of food you eat to the kind of clothes you wear, where you have animal products being used, you have the animals being used for animal testing in drugs. So there's this whole backlash of animal welfare that needs to be talked about. And the idea was to talk to students and make them feel empowered to make change in these domains by giving them access to, by taking them on field trips to places like rescue shelters and having them interact with animals firsthand. We also had a component where we gave them exposure to vegan foods, so like a lot of plant-based products, to create awareness that there are alternatives to animal-based products, and also engaged in very good faith arguments, discussions about what it means to create a system where animals and humans can coexist, because all of these students have seen animals on the roads, stray dogs, cows, cats. Everybody unanimously agrees something has to change. So it was a very end goal action oriented sort of a workshop series that we had.
Thanks, everybody. Just for the audience here, I just want to point out this broad range of projects, just even in this small group. We have entrepreneurship represented, health, social cohesion, and activities that support social cohesion, cultural preservation, intergenerational work, animal welfare, and those kinds. So Projects for Peace is very flexible. All kinds of issues can be addressed. And also want to point out the various approaches that these grantees described, whether it was infrastructure development, educational enrichment, through sports, through workshops or outreach campaigns, helping people link with other providers in the community, providing supplies, or straightforward youth development. So those are all approaches that really could be applied to any of those issues. But these grantees thought about what their issue was and what was the best way to make an impact on the issue that was important to them in the particular community where they were working. So when I read the proposals, one of the things I'm always looking for and thinking about is what happened before they wrote the proposal. What were you thinking about? What were your thought processes when you were developing your proposal? Maybe we can start with Judith, then go to Christian, Ahmed, and Srikanth on this one, okay? Judith, what were you thinking about before you wrote your proposal? How'd you get there?
Sure. This was a very joint thinking between me and Ximena. First, both of us come from developing context. I come from Kenya, Ximena comes from Peru. And we come from a society where women in entrepreneurship are really dealt very unfairly, because most of them are, even though most of them in business, their businesses are very informal. That means they earn like less profits, and they face a lot of structural barriers like access to digital tools, the gender norms, because they're highly patriarchal society that itself prevents them from growing. And again, they also have like very restricted market visibility. So coming from that context itself, both of us really drove us to want to solve this problem. But even in addition to that, I've spent my entire life doing research about women. And more specifically, I did my PhD research based on women empowerment, and writing a report about ease of doing business and seeing that the potential that women have to do business, and yet they can't achieve that potential, was such a pain to me to solve. So that really gave me a lot of motivation to do that. Ximena, on the other hand, has a lot of experience in public service and gender equity in Peru, and she has been able to support designing a lot of projects that are towards supporting women to uplift themselves. And as such, those two things really made us more and more energized to solve this problem. Another thing that brought us together, Ximena and I, is that we did same policy program at U Chicago, and that really gave us the drive to be able to ask ourselves the analytical frameworks that we've learned in University of Chicago. How can we use it to solve problems which are very pertinent to us? At least for those projects, I think I can state that. Ximena, if you want to add other driving factors, you can add.
Okay. Christian, can we hear from you? Thank you. Judith, can we hear from you about what was your thought process in developing the proposal?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I myself a genocide survivor. So after the genocide, let's say 30 years ago, right now 31 years ago in Rwanda, the government of Rwanda has been implementing programs that seeks to promote unity, promote reconciliation among survivors and perpetrators who are right now getting out of prisons because they have finished their sentences. And these are people who are supposed to be living together, coexisting, and it's a very difficult process. And recently, there has been a spike in number of hate speech and genocide ideology cases, mostly in young people. And I myself, as a young person who has been into sports, I was thinking, how can we, try to solve this issue by this using means that I know that can work, which is sports. I used to play basketball, and I used to see how basketball brings together people, and we would see beyond the division, we would see beyond differences that we had was between us when we were playing. So this is the reason why I thought, okay, maybe basketball can be a platform to bring together young people and help them see way beyond what is dividing them. And this is the reason why I was like, okay, maybe I can use this opportunity from, project place to create a platform where young people can engage, come together, discuss, and go beyond what is dividing them and build unity, which is something that I mentioned is a root for peace. So this is what basically was going on in my mind.
Wonderful. Thank you. Ahmed.
Yeah. I think my projects and the one Judith and Ximena did have a little bit of similarities, but essentially we're just trying to empower women. So for me, I had two issues. We have the Kayaye who had migrated from conflict zones. Then you also have the health aspect. Now, these women earn less than $6 a day. and they can't even afford the test for cervical cancer. In fact, they're not even aware of what cervical cancer is. So how do you link up between the healthcare needs and then the peace aspects? So I think that's basically what was going through my mind, because cervical cancer is actually a sexually transmitted infection and it can easily be protected. But these women have absolutely no idea, even though they have a higher risk of contracting it. So I decided that, well, let's marry the two. You just bring the health screening together. Also, you'd have a dialogue with them about this, because these women are living together in the same room. But when they go back to their home regions, there are war ongoing, there are conflicts breeding there. So it's easier for them, because, I mean, if you can live together as one big family in the urban centers, why can't you translate that to your family up there in the north? So we just essentially thought through and then brought out the idea of, well, educate them on cervical cancer screening, make it broader, let it be peer-led, because it's easier if your colleague is telling you about cervical cancer than an outsider who's probably a man and doesn't really get you, even the language barrier and other things. So it was easier to get them together and then have these discussions in small focus groups. So that was really going through my mind when I was thinking about the project.
Ahmed, how did your Srikanth, I'll come to you in just a second. But Ahmed, I'm curious about how your academic work was related to your project.
Yeah, so for me, luckily enough, I mean, it was just in line of my academic, because I'm an obstetrician gynecologist by practice, and I also did my master's in public health in maternal child adolescent health. So women empowerment was kind of like in my direction. I mean, with reproductive health, you do project management, so the analytical aspect in class. It was more like what you learned in class, just put it to use. So it was more in line with that. So you do the project planning, the things you anticipate could go wrong. You get to the field and realize that it's a different ball game altogether. So it was basically directly in line with reproductive justice and health equity for me. So yeah, that was
a direct link there. Yeah. Srikanth, can you tell us a little bit about what you were thinking about when you were putting together your proposal?
Sure, yeah. For me, I think it started from a very young age. I grew up in Bangalore, and I have seen stray animals live not very good lives. And I think from a very formative age, it got me thinking as to what could a good system look like where animals and humans coexist. And initially, it was this, appeal to a emotion of myself, where I was trying to see, oh, this dog has to live a better life, or a cow has to live a better life. But I think as I grew up, it gave me an exposure of what are the other things that are happening in today's civilizational context that need to be changed. And I think it got me to a to an area where I figured it's not going to be a singular aspect which changes overnight. It's not going to be a government policy which makes which turns around a new leaf for animals. It's not going to be this one company that comes across. It needs to be players within the system that make small systemic changes, be it in terms of technological advancements, be it in terms of I don't know, medicine, advocacy, law. So you need advancement in all of these domains to push for animal welfare as a whole. And I guess what that lines to eventually is, can you educate the youth towards the aspects of these topics, so that you can inspire them to be accountable in whatever they're interested in, but towards making changes in the animal welfare space. So the project then went into a direction where we got people from tech, marketing, law, and had guest speakers with the students, so that you could inspire the kids to then grow up to make changes in domains that they're interested in, but for animal welfare.
Great. Thank you very much. I just want to remind everybody who's listening that if you have questions for our panelists, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A chat room, and we'll turn to them shortly. A question I've got is about implementation of the project itself. This is often where applicants can't quite envision how it works on a day-to-day basis. You receive the funds, and then what? How do you move forward? Specifically, what Projects for Peace really values is how are you going to engage with the community members around you, either before you start the project or over the course of implementing. Anando, would you be willing to talk about what you did with your project?
Yes, Betsy. While I was thinking about implementation, I was reminded of the role of the collaborators and community members and community leaders in shaping the project and leading it to its fruition. Because the island where I was working was 2.5 hours away from where we were staying, and so every day the commute was for over 5 hours, and we had to take a boat to go there, and everything was nature dependent. So there were high tides sometimes there was rain, there was strong wind, and there were times that we feared the boat might topple down and so on, and in no way could I have done it all alone. So we were always a pack. So the community sort of, the collaborator that I was working with was an academic partner. It was the School of Nutrition at the Federal University of Bahia. And they sort of sent a team, of students with me to, and also staff members who accompanied me to the islands. And so we lived through all of those adventures that happened on the journey. At the same time, I would also acknowledge the help of the local community leader who brought the community members together for us. So helping to bring the elders, helping to bring the young people, but also, giving us the space, so the community hall where we could conduct our workshops and activities, but also teaching us the cultural nuances. For instance, embedding, lunch at the end of the workshop in our sort of project. So this was something we wouldn't have learned without their support. And again, I would also like to acknowledge the way the community members opened their hearts to me. So I had never worked in a Latin American context before. I was very skeptical whether the project would be completed in the beginning, but towards the end, the final day, as I recollect, is all the community members, they surrounded me and they said, we wish the project went on forever. And they asked me whether I would ever come back. And when we hear these questions, I think we forget all the hardships. And I think it is for moments like these that we feel it was all worth the effort.
Thank you for drawing such a vivid picture there of what implementation was like. Can I just see a show of hands of the panelists? Anando described really specific partners, an academic partner and then a community leader partner, and then getting to know the community members. How many of you had a specific organizational partner in the community that you were working with? Right. Ahmed, who was your partner?
So it was an NGO called Zongo Care Initiative.
Okay, all right. And Judith, who was your partner?
Our partner was a local vocational training center here in Nairobi that hosted us, but we also had a social enterprise that I co-founded that was supporting us in development.
So there was a social enterprise that you had founded previously. Yes. Christian, who was your partner or partners?
So we work directly with the Ministry of Sports in Rwanda.
Okay.
They guided us in the construction of the facility. Gave us standards that we have to follow to build something that can be useful.
Great. Okay. The role of the partners varies as well, right? Providing standards to you, making introductions elsewhere, right? Srikanth, who was your partner?
So for me, it was I had co-founded an organization for animal welfare back in 2020. So we still had a couple of volunteers from there who were interested in running this project. So it was mostly them who was supporting this project. But apart from that, we reached out to different schools to have these workshops, a lot of the existing animal welfare nonprofits so that we can have the field trips in their places, a couple of vegan companies so that we can get some discounts on the vegan products. So there were all of these community partners that we had.
Beautiful. I think we've got a question from someone who's curious about the sustainability of the project, kind of what happens after. But before we get to that, I want to ask this question. Did everything go as planned? I imagine you were all meticulous planners. You budgeted, you had your partnerships figured out, you were thinking about your logistics, you had your outcomes in mind. But I'm curious about what changes or pivots even, major changes were necessary. Ximena, would you like to share?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we need to change a little bit our curriculum and the approach of the lessons. to focus more in the mindset, the mental health, and the self-confidence in these women who were part of the program, because this experience that we had reinforced the idea that building peace is not only about technical training, it's also about helping these young women to see their own potential and trusting their abilities and imagining a wider horizons for themselves. So we need to change this mindset in them. So regarding the curriculum, first we had to rethink the approach about it, because we designed a more advanced skill curriculum, but we quickly realized that the women, and especially these women who were part of this vocational training center, a Tibet program, this is called like Tibet education system, they were starting from different levels of digital literacy, so they need different kind of support. So we adapted by beginning with foundational tools, for example, how to use a smartphone, how to take good pictures of their products, how to send messages to reach like new markets, and how to create this confidence in these very small exercises about product presentation. So every session was very practical, because they not only have this like training to get more skills in a specific area, but they also needed to be like more involved in how these enterprises used to do their daily activities. So this adjustment made the training more inclusive and more like useful for these women.
More
Second,
relevant. More relevant.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, more relevant. Second, we need to change the mindset, as I mentioned before, because it is also as important as the technical skills they were going to receive. So for us, was very important to recognize at the beginning how much mental health, confidence, and self-perception influence in this girls' engagement with the program. So many came to this session believing that they weren't good enough, or they weren't capable enough to sell beyond their immediate community. And our idea with this program was to empower them to believe that they can sell their products abroad. We want to connect these small vendors with US markets, for example. So they need to comply with certain kind of standards, and we need to work more with the technical skills that they may have, but also with a mindset, as I mentioned. So we train them in storytelling, for example. Also, we try to work with them to create certain kind of communities for peer support, and to try to show them that there are other stories from African women who also need to face a lot of challenges, but they were able to succeed. For example, we showed them a video about Chimamanda, that is a very famous African writer, who was able to connect with them directly, because she, in these small tech talks, she explained her life history, how she faced these challenges that happens in African society and around the world. But probably in Africa, they have like small challenges that have like more lasting effects in how women are going to behave, how women are going to choose their careers, how women are going to take certain kind of decisions in their lives. So for us, it was very important to show them and to try to connect them with role models that not only become from the American or other kind of perspective, but also from African women.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm curious about other projects and pivots that you made or changes. Anando, do you have an example?
Yeah, I was, in the beginning, we had the intended outcome of the project was a cookbook. So where young people work with elders in the community, and together we come up with a cookbook. But it became very difficult in the beginning to recruit young people. So many of them, we had very few young people join the project. A lot of them also dropped out. And then we had to rethink our strategy to involve young people. So we started talking with the academic partner, the community leader, and then we thought, what if we do something like a podcast, that would lead to some sort of skill building, but also something that young people would be interested in. And it so happened that they got so interested in the whole project that towards the end, they wanted to teach us and the elders about the foods that they were interested in eating, like pasta or pizza or something like that. And it became difficult for us to find a space where we could do all of that. So this time we decided that instead of us going to the island, what if we invite them to come to the mainland? So we arranged for them a boat to come to the university. And, since the whole project was about food, we decided to cook together. So it was not only, sharing meals as we always did, but also cooking and learning from them together. So these were some pivots, these were some changes made to the original pivot, I would say.
Just in the course of your work as a result of getting to know the community members you were working with, right? Responding to them. Srikanth, did you make any pivots or changes over the course of your project?
Oh yes, plenty. I think before I set out to go to India, the project was in Bangalore. The thinking was I would have all of the schools that we're going to go to lined up so that once I go, the mission is very, okay, we go to school A, B, C, D, E, and then we do our thing and we come back. And then it came to a point where we had a workshop plan, which was a 2-day plan, where we first had like a series of these guest lectures, and then the second day was a field trip to all of these shelters. And then we realized that a lot of these schools have their own timeline, a bunch of events that they have, and getting a slot with different schools seemed to be very difficult. And it came to a point where when I landed India, we had no schools planned except one immediately the next day. So I had to go to that school with a little bit of a jet lag, but then eventually figure out the remaining 6 schools that we had to go to, because the proposal said we're going to go to 6 schools and I don't have anything else planned, and I have exactly 30 days because I have to come back to New York at the end of that. So there was a week where there was no school, and I was scrambling for, reaching out to every possible person in my network to get leads of schools, and then really adapting the program towards something that would fit their schedule. And I think that was a lot of pivoting that we had to do in the meantime, making the coordination with the school, the shelter. So there's a lot of pivots from what I had initially imagined the workshop to look like.
We're going to move to this question about sustainability and how you left the project, and does it still continue? So that's going to be our next question. But there's a question here about how early did you reach out to partners? So it sounds like, Srikanth, you had imagined that the schools would be set up, so you must have reached out to people ahead of time, but then they needed to change once you got to the location.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we reached out to them a good 2-3 months in advance, had some back and forth with the email. Some of them were replying slow. Some of them said, we'll reply at the end of the month. So there was all of this initial contact that was done a couple of months ago, but nothing was finalized till I was actually on ground. And some of them I had to go to the school and say, hey, look, we had this email, but can we set a date?
Right.
Yeah.
Does somebody else want to respond to that about how far in advance were you talking to partners? Judith?
Yeah. We reached out to our partners immediately. International House Chicago mentioned, like, publicized us as winners, because we already knew that we were going to work with partners, so we reached them immediately.
And that was probably in about March or April.
Yes.
Once you knew that your proposal had been funded, you were reaching out to them and letting them know that this was a possibility.
Yes.
Okay. And then when did you travel? What month did you travel?
We traveled in July, mid-July. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Good. Anybody else want to comment about when they contacted partners? How far in advance were they in touch?
I got in touch with my sort of the academic partner way back, before the application stage. So it was in early December. So sometime
before, while you were writing proposals still.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even before I sort of designed the proposal. So I had some ideas in mind, and I actually coincidentally met them in London. So one of the academic partners was here at a conference on envisioning environmental equity. And I just happened to find their presentation very interesting. And I just sort of pitched my project idea to them, saying, like, would there be something that, we could work out together? And they were interested. And that's how we got talking, and the proposal was designed.
Oh, brilliant. Good. So let's talk about sustainability and how your work might continue. Is there somebody who would like to speak to that about what's happening now, several months later? Judith?
Yes, so I think I can go first. Right before finishing our project, because we are doing it in partnership of a public institution, we had attracted a lot of government attention, and they called us. The Ministry of Education called Ximena and I to their office, and they asked us about the project. We explained to them, and they told us, "Can you come again and do it?" We said, "No, we've just been funded one time." They said, "Please go think about it and give us a plan." So that was a confirmation that we need to do these projects more and more. But either way, we also had planned prior that we are not doing this as a one-time event. It's going to be a continuous event. Right now, I'm in Kenya doing part 2 of the project that we started today. We were very happy to hear girls reference to the things we taught them over the summer, and some of them referencing to how they've started businesses and the progress they've made. So we anticipate that Kuzadada will continue growing, and really appreciate to Project for Peace and International House for giving us this opportunity.
Good. Is there somebody else who wants to talk about next steps or how the work is continued? What your plan for sustainability was?
For me, it was similar to what Judith said as well. We plan to have this as a series of events, and then as we get funding, we want to go ahead and do more of these projects. But this was when we spoke to the schools. A lot of them said, "Can we have another session, or can we have a subset of it? Can we just have the field trip component?" And again, those were subject to the funding. So we said, we're going to do this as we move along in the future. We designed a couple of merch which we usually sell to fundraise for the vaccination projects we have for stray animal vaccinations. So we have a lot of those merch left, and we're planning to go ahead and continue some of these activities by selling the merch, making some money so that we can, cover the costs.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? Ahmed, Christian? Yeah, Ahmed, tell us.
I think for us, because I have the project in conjunction with a local NGO. So they essentially are taking over the running of the project. So they hold this health screening fairs occasion, I think every 3 months. So they kind of are taking care of. So once they get funds, they do it. One other thing we inculcated was the use of peer trainers. So because we used the Kayayi themselves as peer trainers, it's an ongoing conversation they could have. We also made sure that they have an office, something like a cooling place in the marketplaces. So we have a banner there, and also have posters around, so that at least they serve as reminders. And luckily for us, the government of Ghana have decided to roll out vaccination for cervical cancer, which they started in September, right after our project. So it's like there's an ongoing noise around cervical cancer. So it kind of fits into the project directly.
Wonderful. Did you know that was going to happen when with the vaccinations? Or
after we had made contact to start the project? That's where I think about a month before we launched our project, that's when we heard that the government of Ghana was actually trying to roll out the vaccination process. So it was more like the education before the project was right in time.
Very timely. Very timely. Okay, I'm going to continue questions that are coming from the audience. One question is, how did you decide the length of the field research? How did you decide how long you were going to be working? Is there anybody who would like to respond to that? I imagine partially that's budget dependent, and partially that is how long does it take to meet your goals, and what else is going on in your life? Am I right? Am I right? Judith, go ahead.
Yes, so the way we decided our project length was first based on budget, like you indicated, but also because our partner is a school institution and they have their on and off times. So we had needed to plan to coincide when students are in school, because they're not able to get time or resources to show up in the institution when it's not a learning time.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Is there anybody else who wants to talk about that, about the length of time they were doing their project?
Yeah, I was For me, it depended, of course, on my availability also. So how much leave I could take from my university,
Right.
but also the availability of the collaborator. So they suggested, a particular time because then they would be free. So it was holiday or vacation time in the university. So students were also available to provide support around that time, but also thinking about how long would the community also be interested in taking this project. So I think it was a decision that involved a lot of these factors together.
We've just got about 10 minutes left in our hour together. I would like to ask this question, since a lot of people who are listening today are, we hope will think about, imagine how they can contribute to peace. Maybe some of them will write a proposal, and maybe some of them will implement a project for peace in the summer of 2026. If I could hear from everybody on the panel today about what advice you would give somebody who was thinking about doing this work or who was in the midst of writing their proposal, what advice would you give them? How about if I start with Ahmed?
Yeah, for me, I think just do it. Because when I started drafting my proposal, I was like, well, what has cervical cancer really got to do with peace? But I do realize that it comes from your definition of peace, how you view peace and what you seek to achieve with that. Once you are able to get a definition of peace centered around, no matter the because you can see that we have diverse projects, it just fits into it. So if you have a project you've been thinking of actually doing, just think of how it relates to peace. Likely, peace is not a fixed definition. So you just have to come up with how and what you view peace should be. Then you just go ahead and then just give it a try. Yeah,
I could not have said anything it better, Ahmed. I appreciate that so much. We have a very broad, at Projects for Peace, we have a very broad definition of peace, and we're challenging you, just as Catherine Davis challenged everybody. Think about how you connect with the idea of peace. Great. Ximena, what advice would you give folks on the call?
Yeah, I totally agree with Ahmed's answer, because when we were brainstorming about what kind of projects we were able to develop during the summer, we have like a different kind of ideas, but both of us share this passion for women empowerment. And we met in a different platform, but we're trying to make a change also in that area in our lives. So I think that we connect all our past experience, our networks, the current networks that we have, and we just submit our proposal based on a thing that really we were passionate about. To work with these women in this specific community for us was like very important, So just try to look for your passion, read very carefully the instructions, and try to look for feedback from the different international houses or other kind of groups you are working with. And that's all. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to go Anando,
Okay.
Christian, Srikanth, and then Judith. So we'll hit everybody here. Yeah, Anando.
Yeah, I would echo what everybody said. I think start with your interests first, see what interests you, and see how you can translate it into what you can do. So, reach out to collaborators early on, and keep your eyes, ears, nose, everything open for information. You never know when collaborations can spring up. Read the instructions, carefully. And also sometimes your own international houses may have set an early deadline and they may have some other requirements. For instance, I remember at iHouse London, we also had to submit a CV, for instance, along with the other application package, and our deadline was set much earlier than before. So yeah, I would echo what everybody said. Start with your interests and play to your strengths.
Great. Thank you. Christian?
Yeah, same. I think I would encourage people to start with an interest. But again, try to see if your interests are relevant to the community you want to work with. I mean, work with the community, engage them to see if the interests are really well aligned with their needs. And I think this is a very good opportunity to reconnect with the community or community of interest. And you will have guidance. You will have guidance, advice, and of course, financial support to do so. And I always want to encourage everyone who is in development work to always try to think and design with the community, not for the community. Don't design for them. They live the experience. They know much better. So don't design for them. Try to think and design with them. Yeah.
That's terrific. Thank you very much, Christian. Srikanth.
Yeah. I want to echo what everybody said. So it's find one thing that you're passionate about and kind of just do it. There's going to be a lot of changes, pivots along the way. So you have to stay extremely optimistic. And one thing that's clear is there's no one size fits all sort of a solution. You can really make your solution aligned with your particular story, and it could be it could be in the country that you're in, it could be in a place that you have a strong network. So if there's one problem statement that you have, you can really you can try to identify what is the best USP you have from your story and your experiences, and that goes a long way towards making your application even stand out, or your solution stand out, because it's very unique to you.
Wonderful. Judith.
Yeah, so even though you cannot go wrong with passions and lived experience, I think I would want to say work with an expert. For instance, Ximena and I worked with a professor at Harris School, University of Chicago, where we went, and she was able to help us separate fluff with the real impact, because she's led so many projects in Africa, and to be able to single out on the things we need to include in our curriculum that will create impactful and ripple effect for future, like will be able to help us achieve our goals. So that is very helpful.
What a wonderful set of advice. Things that I heard is know yourself and your passions. Think deeply about how those passions connect to this idea of peace. Engage with your communities earlier rather than later to see whether those passions are shared by the community that you're working with. And also be working with experts in these areas. You may not be the first person who is doing this work, and you search for colleagues that can teach you over the course of the project. Also, be prepared for pivots because those are inevitable as we implement this work. I want to thank everyone for applying, everyone on this panel for imagining what peace could look like, taking the chance, taking the time to apply for a Projects for Peace grant, putting such care into your proposal and your budget, and then spending the many months implementing the project this past summer. So congratulations to the panelists. Thank you all very, very much. And to International House, I'd like to say thank you very much for having me and for putting on this panel and for carving out space to talk about how we all can contribute to peace in the communities we care most about. With that, the program can conclude. Thanks to the audience for being here. We encourage you all to apply. I look forward to reading your proposals next spring. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.